So today what we are going to see is, in addition to what we have been seeing already in S3, we are going to see how to create lifecycle policies. We are also going to see how to use a cross-region replication also. So these are two different topics we are going to see one by one today. So what is lifecycle policies? We saw what is versioning before. It is nothing but keeping a track of changes to your files so that you can roll back to any older version in case you want, or if there is for a compliance reason, somebody says that give me a file which was there and this date, then you can go back and give you them the particular dated file or things like that. So when we are talking about lifecycle policies, what we are meaning here is you can have automated tiering and cost control. Say, for example, in medical industry and insurance industry, quite often this use case is very common. After a certain period of time, let us say you have registered for a policy or visited a doctor. For that doctor visit and during that medical care time, your documents will be requested for accessed very frequently. But once that activity is completed, it will be stored only for compliance reasons for a very long time, say for example 7 years. So during that time you're not going to access the data frequently. In that case, you can move them to a infrequent access storage or a Glacier kind of an archival storage to control your cost. And you can do this automatically in Amazon. So the way that we do that is by doing a transitioning. As you can see here on the screen, you can move the archives to an infrequent access or a Glacier depending upon your retrieval mechanisms. And also after say 7 years or 10 years, you don't want that document even for compliance reasons also. Or say after, let us say it is a telephone bill you're submitting to your company, and after the reimbursal process is completed and the tax compliance is completed, those soft copies of the bills are not required by the enterprise anymore. So they have to be deleted after a certain period of time. So you can go ahead and say after 365 days or 370 days, delete all the soft copies of the bills. So you can do things like that using the lifecycle policies. And a combination of these are always used. That is, first is you set the transition to a lower cost, and after the transition to a lower cost is completed, after another set of time period, you can set it for expiration. And this policy is completely software driven. You can go ahead and change these policies anytime, and they take into effect almost immediately. That is immediately in the sense the policy minimum duration is like 1 day. So if you change it within the same day, it is going to affect in the midnight cycle. So the minimum duration is 1 day. You need to remember that for Glacier. So we are going to see that the cold data, the medical example that I gave you guys is mostly for cold data. So after the, let us say the x-axis is the time period. So T is the date that data was created, that is on the left-hand side axis. Let me just try to highlight it. So we are talking about here T, the time the data was created, and the time increases T plus 3, T plus 5, and keeps on growing. So you see the access frequency is constantly decreasing, and it flattens out after some time. So this is a typical use case that an industry is seeing. It is not just applied to, you can apply it to most industries out there, especially enterprises that we are talking about. After the initial period of time, the data is not frequently accessed. So in those cases, you can quite easily move the data into a cold storage and reduce your cost, and also, if possible, completely delete them to reduce your cost even more. So typically you can see here somewhere along the line, if I can put a line here, after 30 days, it almost flattens out to very regular usage, and you're not using it frequently, probably once per day or twice per day for checking backups or checking the versions or things like that. So this use case typically applies to almost all industries, as I said earlier. So go ahead and recommend your clients to do analysis of their data and see how much frequently they're using it, and then recommend them different storage options. So we saw already the standard infrequent access. So there is one option. The first transitioning is you can move your data from standard storage class to a standard infrequent access storage class. So typically in S3 you have three different storage classes. One is the default standard, and then the standard IA, and then the Glacier part of it. So the first transition that you can do is from standard to standard IA, and any time that you want to set it. And once the IA is set, you can move it to Glacier. It is not that you have to always come to IA and then move it to Glacier. You can also directly move it to Glacier. But people tend to do it this way because when you're doing it in IA, it is still frequently accessible. But if you remember, Glacier has a retrieval time involved. There is a 3 to 5 hours of retrieval time that is involved there when you're putting in Glacier. And what I'm going to give you the next information is hot off the press. Amazon this week only announced something saying immediate retrieval for Glacier. That is for an additional extra cost. Amazon will allow you to retrieve a certain amount of data immediately. When I say immediately, it is there is also a small time period involved from the time you make the request and the time data is available to you. But it is not at a 3 to 6 hour time period. It is a lot smaller than that. But you don't have to confuse it. Usually Glacier is most of the times is 3 to 6 period, but things are changing in the service itself. So they are coming up with additional services where if you pay a little bit extra money, they are ready to give it to you a little earlier for that. So that is what transitioning to standard IA and Glacier means. It allows for versioning support. That means that you can move only the latest version or only the older versions, so that your latest versions will be in the standard storage class, and only the older versions will be in your infrequent access or Glacier class. So whichever version you want to move it, automatically you can select that. And as I already said, expiration policy can be set. That means that after 370 days, you can delete them. The number of days I'm giving you is an arbitrary number. It will be always more than the transition period. So if you set transition for 1 day, you can start deleting it from the second day. If you set transition for 30 days, you can delete it on the 31st day or expire it on the 31st day. And that is also possible to upload directly to standard infrequent access. Yesterday we saw that when I uploaded some object, I chose the storage class as infrequent or reduced redundancy storage. So that is also possible to directly upload your objects to infrequent access. So it's not necessary to put it into standard and then you put it into IA. You can directly upload here itself. This is all cost optimization techniques and good housekeeping techniques that you should keep in mind when you're talking about S3. Because it is a huge amount of storage and the cost is cheap, people tend to keep on adding files, and over a period of time, a bucket becomes having a lot of files. It is cluttered and it is very difficult to housekeep them properly. So set up these policies in the beginning itself, or recommend your clients to have these kind of policies so that your buckets are clean and very efficient in to manage them. So typically a lifecycle policy, if you are writing it manually, if you're doing it through a CLI mode or a programmatic mode, a policy will look like this that I'm showing here. And the highlighted part is the transition part, and it will ask you the number of days, and it will ask you what is the storage class that you want to give. So these are the two elements that I'm talking about. Lucky for us, Amazon allows us to do this through GUI also. So when we are seeing the demo in a short while, I'll show you how to do this through the GUI part of it. For the people who are interested with the CLI, this is how the lifecycle policy for transition happens. And just below that, you can also see the transition after 365 days goes to Glacier. So if I move forward, that is what I'm saying. So you have moved it to standard. So from standard storage, you are moving it to Glacier now after 365 days. And you also have the expiration bit also even below that. After 500 days or about close to 2 years or 1.5 years, automatically the data gets deleted. So these numbers are arbitrary, just shown here for a sample purpose, but in real world, consult your clients and choose those numbers appropriately. So this is a pictorial representation of how it looks like. So you have a bucket on the left hand side with a lot of objects, and after 30 days your lifecycle policies will automatically kick in, and the cleaning process takes up, and it sends it to the Glacier part of it. So some data has gone to Glacier now, and after 365 days, automatically the Glacier lifecycle policies will kick in, and then they will be sent to your recycle bin or deleted from your account. So this is another way to understand what really happens on the background when we are setting up lifecycle policies along with versioning. Why I mentioned versioning is, once again, you can do this lifecycle policies only for older files, or you can apply it for a latest version of files. So you can have both the files affected by the lifecycle policies also. So both are possible when you're going to configure them. So that is about versioning and lifecycle policies. The other core topic that we are going to see is a cross-region replication. We spoke about it quite often. We come across the scenario very often in our professional life. Things like your manager comes and says that I want this data to be copied from this server to this server. Both the servers might be in different locations, so we do a tar or SCP or WinSCP or FTP, and then download it and then upload it again. So these are the different mechanisms that quite often happens in the on-premise data center or in the cloud as well. In assuming you're not in AWS, data gets moved from one place to another place. But if that is going to happen more regularly, you are getting that request more and more often. Cross-region replication is one fantastic feature that you want to look at. What happens is, as you can see here on the image at the bottom, let us say your source is at Virginia, that is on the east coast of the United States, and you want to send all the data to your destination in Oregon region. What you do is you go to S3, create another bucket in Oregon region, call it, let us say, destination bucket, enable versioning on the source and destination, and go to the source. In the advanced section of the properties, you will have a cross-region replication. So you just click on that. It will ask you a few questions saying, do you want to copy all the data, and do you have the necessary permissions to copy the data, or do you want to provide me or create the permissions? So if you don't have the permissions already configured, click on create. It will create the necessary permissions to copy from the source and destination, and you enable it finally. Once you enable it, anything added to the source bucket after you enable will get replicated to the other region. Usually there will be a small delay depending upon the file size. It will get replicated. If it is a very small file, within 1 or 2 minutes it will get replicated. But if it is a bigger file, it takes some time to get replicated. But one thing that you should remember always is only the objects that are added after you enable cross-region replication will get replicated. So if you have 1,000 objects and then you go ahead and create cross-region replication and then expect the 1,000 objects on the destination, it won't be there. But now we have enabled it, and you add another 10 objects, you can expect those 10 objects to be in your destination, not the 1,010 objects totally. So that is one important thing that you need to remember, because sometimes I have had people saying that I enable cross-region replication, though it is not replicating my data which is in my bucket. It doesn't work on already existing objects. It works only on the newly added objects. So the other question will come. So now I have a bucket, so much of data is there. Now how do I copy all this data there? So what in this case you can do is you set up another source locally and then enable cross-region replication, and you move data from one bucket to the bucket where you are going to get replicated. So in this case, it is an internal move or a fresh add to the source bucket, and all the data gets replicated to the destination also. So that is how you do cross-region replication. And another interesting feature is you can do it for an entire bucket, or you can use it by prefix based. Let us say you want to move only the certain files which are under images folder or images directory. That also you can do. Or you want to do it only for files which are starting with a certain text. That also you can do. So there are multiple filters that can be applied to your account, so that you can move certain files and not all the files. And in case you want all the files, that is also possible. So that is about cross-region replication. So let's go ahead and talk about a little bit about encryption. We did this practically when we were looking at S3 earlier. This is the text behind it. So Amazon allows you to do both client-side encryption as well as server-side encryption. When you're talking about the client-side encryption, what it means is you can encrypt with your own keys before you upload to Amazon, and you can manage the keys yourself and never send them to Amazon. That is, when you're retrieving it or when you're storing it in Amazon, it is all encrypted format. Nobody in Amazon will know what is the object or what is the content of that object. Even if somebody has access to that object without your key, they will not be able to see it. They will just get an encrypted alphanumeric characters or jump characters which they cannot decipher. So that is what client-side encryption using your own encryption key means. You will need an Amazon SDK to do that so that you can send an encrypted document, or in other words, you will need a CLI or a programming language to do this. So the other one, the server-side encryption, that is what we saw when we are doing our demos, and especially we did this part. We used Amazon managed keys to encrypt our objects. We just checked the box which says encrypt the data at rest, and keys are managed by S3 itself. If you remember, we chose the option which said Amazon S3 master key. So that is what we did when we are trying to encrypt it. And since it is managed by Amazon, while storing or writing it into the S3 bucket, it encrypts it. And whenever you are sending a read request or copy or a get request, Amazon will decrypt it and send it back to you. So in this way, data is stored at encrypted. Data is stored encrypted during the rest, or when it is stored in the data itself, not when it is in transit. So if you want to have encryption at a transit also, then you have to look at SSL or TLS or any other form of encryption, or you might have some other encryption layer by using VPN and tunneling and all those things. So the data travels through secure means. And you also can manage your own keys using Amazon KMS keys. So that is also possible. You can upload. The KMS is a different service. We will see that later. But what happens is if you have your own 2048 SHA keys, RSA keys, you can upload it to Amazon and tell Amazon that use my keys to encrypt the data and decrypt the data. That is also possible. And there is an interesting question quite often that comes just like now, is there a cost of using encryption using Amazon keys? So the answer to that is no. There is a marginal cost involved, very, very marginal cost. There is like a $0.0015 dollars per request. It is based on the number of requests you make to the key itself, the key management service itself. So it is the cost is there, but very, very marginal. And once again, in the free tier, there are certain number of requests that is given free to you, so you don't have to worry about that as of today. But definitely there is a cost involved by using Amazon keys, and it also applies to you using your own keys as well. It is because it is not for the key storage, or it is not for the encryption itself. It is just for retrieving those keys and reading or writing the data to S3 will request a key access from the KMS. So for that request, Amazon charges you. So let's move forward. I think we have a pictorial representation of how the key or the encryption happens. So if you have a user on the left hand side making a request to Amazon, the data is encrypted, so automatically the KMS service will be requested for the keys. And once the keys comes to S3, the S3 service will automatically decrypt the data and then send it back to the user here. So the request goes here, and then if the data is encrypted, Amazon goes internally, talks to KMS and gets the data. And once the data is decrypted, it is sent back to the user. So, but whenever data is stored at rest, the data will be encrypted using the keys. And there will be one more key here. Amazon will usually encrypt the keys itself using one more key and store it with a master key. That is on the Amazon part of it. We don't have to worry about it. But if you are worried about how this key will be stored, this is how it is. This key in itself is secured by another master key, and all these keys are frequently rotated by Amazon. When I say rotated, it means that it is changed more frequently than we can imagine. So let us go ahead and do a demo on some of these items right now. Okay, great. I'm I'm not able to get my window working. Okay, great. So I have already logged into my S3 service, and these are all the, I'm in a particular bucket called access logs. We are going to use this bucket for creating our lifecycle policies. That is the first demo that we are going to see, because in this bucket, let me just open it once again. We have close to 107 objects, as you might be able to see on my screen. And let me just sort it by last modified. So here, as you can see, we have files which were created on October 26th. And if I scroll down all the way, you can see here some of them are made on October 25th and some of them made on October 24th also. So when we enable a lifecycle policy, and tomorrow if we come back and see that, we can see it has taken effect on certain files. That is on 27th, you will have new files, and that might be in a different storage class. Now, as of now, you see that all of them are in standard storage class. So what we are going to do is first is transition them to and reduce redundancy storage. Okay, what we'll do is we'll move it to Glacier because reduced redundancy has a minimum time period of 30 days. Anyway, for doing that, what you need to do is go to management, open your bucket and go to the management tab, and the first option that you see here is the lifecycle tab. So if it is in somewhere like analytics or something, just go ahead and click on lifecycle so that you can bring the focus to lifecycle itself. And next thing you do is click on add lifecycle rule. We are going to add a rule on when you want to migrate it, and you will get this friendly tab, and we need to give a name for our rule. So logs cleanup, that is what I'm going to name my rule. So I'm just going to leave it empty so that it is going to apply to all the files. Or what we will do is, let me just go back and see what is the name of the files that are being there. So you can see here some of the files are named as access logs, and if I scroll down, some of the files are named as a static site. Let me go here. If you can see my screen, this one and this one are two different beginning with two different file names, because I created two static websites, and for each of them I created a different prefix for logging. So you will have two different flavors there. So we can create one for access logs tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. So access -logs-, so that is what we need to remember. Let us go ahead and create it. Go to management, add lifecycle rule, logs cleanup, and here I'm going to say access logs-, that is going to be my prefix. See here, it's just prompting me whether it is a prefix or a tag. I'm going to click on prefix. So click on next, and here remember I told you for which version you want to take it into effect. So I'm going to choose both my current version as well as my previous versions, and it is asking me you don't have any transition rule set up for the current version of the objects. So let us go ahead and click on transition, and here I'm going to choose Glacier. The reason for that is if I choose standard IA, the minimum has to be 30 days for transitioning to IA storage class. So we don't have 30 days to wait for this policy to take into effect. So to see the policy take into effect, we will choose it Amazon Glacier and leave it as 1 day. That is the minimum. And we will do the same thing for Amazon previous version of the objects also. So this is for current version, and this transition rule is for the previous versions. So again, set it to 1, then click on next. So here I'm going to set the expiration. After how many days I wanted to set expiration, what I'm going to do is set it for both, and I'm going to set the expiration for 2 days. So when we come back on Monday, we should see all this access -logs set up. That is, whichever is marked for expiration tomorrow will be deleted by Saturday or Sunday. So when we come back on Monday or things after that, we should not be able to see some of the files that are marked for expiration. So here is another interesting thing: cleanup objects and incomplete multi-part uploads. Remember, we were talking about multi-part uploads, and in case what happens if the upload is disconnected, and will there be a lot of objects? So if I go ahead and click on this, it will automatically clean up my incomplete multi-part uploads after 7 days. I can change it to saying after the first day also you can clean it up. So click on next. It is going to give me a summary of all the things that we have chosen so far. The log name, the scope, where it is, which are the files which is going to delete, and it is going to transition to Glacier after 1 day, and it is going to expire them after 2 days and permanently delete them after. Okay, let us go ahead and just change it to 3. So expiry happens after 2 days and deletion happens after 3 days. So click on save. I think I did it, so it should refresh the screen anytime now. Yeah. So you can see here that one rule has been created. I can have another rule for site hyphen logs also, but let it be there. So this is how you create a rule for lifecycle management in your account. So this is the replication part of it. So let us not go into that right away. Let us speak about this one for a minute. So now that we have set up our lifecycle policies and the minimum duration is about 1 day. So tomorrow we will come back and see what happens to our files in the those buckets, and we will possibly see them for expiration also on Monday or Tuesday or somewhere in the future. So now that is done, let us go ahead and see how to set up a cross-region replication. I can use any of the existing buckets for source and destination, but to make it simple and clean, what we will do is we'll set up 2 different buckets for source and destination and make it easy for you guys to look at. So let us create the source bucket first. I'm going to call it the source cross-region replication. Let's see, demo. Let us see, nobody's created a file like that. And let us say the source is going to be in Mumbai, and I'm going to click on next. Come on. And remember, for cross-region replication to work, you need to have versioning enabled. So I'm going to enable versioning, click on save. I'm not going to do any of the other things. You know all the rest of the other things. You just don't need to change any of those things here. Just click on create bucket. It should refresh anytime. We should have a CRR here. Okay, great. We are in Mumbai. Okay, let us create our destination bucket also. So destination CRR demo, and let it be in Virginia. So in other words, we are going to move data from India to the US automatically now. So let us go ahead and click on next. Once again, I want to enable versioning. Click on next, just summarize everything and then click on next. So now we have got 2 buckets available for us. Let me just filter it based on CRR. So this way also you can see focus only on the items that you want to really see. You can use the search bar here and just see only the buckets we are focusing on. So we have a source bucket and we also have a destination bucket, and just click on the source bucket, go to management, and you will find the option called replication just next to lifecycle. Click on replication. Earlier this option used to be under properties itself. Now they have moved it under management. So things keep on changing, but somewhere in these 4 tabs you should be finding replication. That is how I tell myself, instead of memorizing where it is under, just look under properties. If it is not there, look under management. So under replication, I'm going to add a rule here, and it is asking me, do I want all contents in this object or a certain prefix? So let us go ahead and do this option. So prefix. So I'm going to say images img hyphen, or what is the example it is giving, just as a last character. So I'm going to say img hyphen. If it doesn't work, let us go ahead and do all contents. So I'm going to say enable here, click on next, and it is asking me which is my destination. You see that in the top there are 4 options. The first one, source, is done. We are at the second one, so it is asking me destination. and here I'm going to choose destination CRR, this one. And do I want to change the storage class for the replicated object? So that also I can do at the source. Let us say you can use it as a backup mechanism also. Sometimes people use this for a backup and recovery mechanism. They take a snapshot or a database backup and put it into one region's bucket and use CRR to copy it across the globe and move it to another place across the globe. Say, for example, your production database is in Virginia. You can move the database snapshot to Singapore for disaster recovery purpose. And since it is a backup, you're not going to use it regularly, you can put it under a different storage class, for example, reduced redundancy or standard IA. So in this case, let me go ahead and do reduce redundancy and click on next. So now we have done two steps. We are in the third step. It is asking me what permissions should I use. Do I have already permissions? No, this is my new bucket and I have not set up anything here. So when I click on it, it is giving me the existing roles that is in my account, but I don't want to use any of them because I don't know what it does. So I'm going to click on create a new role. So automatically Amazon will set up the necessary permissions between the source and destination buckets to copy data and put it in the destination bucket. So click on next, review everything here, click on save. So I'm going to open another tab so that we will have our destination bucket also open. If you can see here, the IAM role got created, the permissions got created, and it is showing it here. The source, the destination, and the necessary permissions created. And in case if you want to copy the bucket policy, click on that. It will be a JSON policy. If anybody is interested in looking at the policy, go ahead and check that out. So let me duplicate this window. I am in the source bucket, as you can see here, source CRR demo. Let me duplicate this bucket. And I'm going to move to destination. It is just for visualizing it quickly. I'm just going to go here and keep it here. As of now, you can see here, this bucket is empty. I'm in the destination bucket, as you can see here. So let us go back to the source and go to overview. This bucket is also empty. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to upload a few objects, two objects particularly, one with a prefix of img and another one without a prefix of img. So for that, let me go ahead, upload, and click on add files. Usually on my desktop, I will have some files which is of different size for easier uploads. Okay, let us check something which is easy to upload. Okay, let us call this prefixed by home img hyphen. Okay, this is our first one, and let us say this guy is the second one. I'm going to select both, drag and drop here. So you see here two files, one is picture 4 and another one is img picture 3. So if everything and all my configuration works right, only this file should get replicated to my target. So click on next, and I'm not going to change any permissions here. And if you see here, I'm choosing storage class as standard here on my source. So let us see what happens to my storage class in destination, and click on upload. So let's hope that upload happens faster. Okay, one file, come on, it should say it anytime. Let us refresh it once again. Okay, so time on my screen is 9:14 p.m. So I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes for the replication to take into effect. You can see here this file size is 26.9 KB on standard class. Should happen very soon, but I'm not going to be very hopeful right away, but let us wait for some time for the storage to move the data across the globe. And remember that this is not an instant copy or a real-time copy, so there are a lot of moving pieces on the background. So don't try to configure this for real-time access or simultaneous backup, things like that. You can use it for a backup, not for real-time use cases. So this is how you set up CRR. Let us give it a minute. for the replication process to kick into effect.